Tonight I want to talk to you about living the dream. I remember today I was with somebody and I said, you know something? I said, how's it going? They said, well, I'm living the dream. I said, well, what does that mean? What does living the dream mean? Does it mean that you have everything, or does it mean that you have nothing and you're being kind of sarcastic about it? What does it really mean? Yesterday, interestingly enough, do you realize that there was one ticket? Everybody say one ticket. There was one ticket that won $1.6 billion. Even after taxes, that's not bad. I mean, just think about it. I mean, even if taxes were 50%, you still got $800 million. One, North Carolina. One, or South Carolina. You know what? I get the two of them mixed up. One's kind of like above the other one. I don't know whether they put the South Carolina on the top or the South Carolina on the bottom, but whatever it is, that there was one ticket that won $1.6 billion. But take a look at something with me, if you would. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 5, verse number 11, the Bible tells us something kind of interesting. Take a look and see what Solomon said. He said, the more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. Somebody said to me today, they said, you know, I'll tell you what, if I had that one ticket, they said, I wouldn't tell anybody that I had that ticket. I said, you know what, somehow, some way, they can smell it. They can smell it. Like if you think you're spending too much time in a lonely life, the moment that your ship comes in, just remember your family's going to be waiting on the shore for you to get into harbor. It's really true. So here it is. The more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. So what's the advantage of wealth except perhaps, he said, to watch it run through your fingers. Now this is a smart guy. He's talked about as being the richest man who ever lived. And he said, so what good is wealth except to watch it to run through your fingers? Well, you know, you need enough to be able to get by. So what does all of that mean? Interestingly enough, does having a lot constitute living the dream? Now, certainly if you had that one ticket for $1.6 billion, it seems like it might help. But let's take a look and go a little bit further and find something in the very same chapter. In verse number 19, the Bible says this. He said, it's a good thing to receive wealth from God and the good health to enjoy it. To enjoy your work and accept your lot in life, that's indeed a gift from God. People who do this rarely look with sorrow on the past, for God has given them reasons for joy. I like another translation that says this, that you will seldom reflect upon the days of your life because God will keep you occupied with the gladness of your heart. God will keep you occupied. Say, I will seldom reflect on the days of my life because God will keep me occupied with the gladness of my heart. But now notice he said this. He said that these individuals, they rarely look with sorrow on the past, for God has given them reasons for joy. He said, there's another serious tragedy I've seen. I've seen this serious tragedy in the world, and that's this, that God gives great wealth and honor to some people and gives them everything they could ever want, but then he doesn't give them the health to enjoy it. That's pretty tough. Can you imagine that? You spend all of your life accumulating money and then giving it all back to the doctors because you didn't spend enough time resting. Pretty interesting how all of that goes. And he says, but you could have everything you ever want, but then he doesn't give them the health to enjoy it. It says they die and others get it all. He said, this is meaningless. This is a meaningless, sickening tragedy. So what are the things that I need to have internally? See, if I want to live the dream isn't defined by somebody else. It's not defined on the outside of your life. Really, the dream is actually defined by what you have inside. So let's take a look at a few of these things and see what it is to live the dream inside. Here, number one, he says here, you have to have unflinching courage. If you want to live the dream, you have to be courageous. If you're ever going to go for your dreams, if you're ever going to be a person that's successful at anything, you need to be courageous about it. In order to be successful, you have to take risks. You have to be willing to take yourself out of your own comfort zone, to go further than you've ever gone before, if in fact that you're ever going to live a dream. I have a dream to do something. It's like a person says, oh boy, I'll tell you what, I have a dream that I could play the piano. I said, well, have you ever taken lessons? No, but I have a dream. Well, that's all it's ever going to be, is a dream. But after a while, that dream becomes a nightmare when you don't begin to pursue it. And so the first thing is that I have to have the unflinching courage. So what is courage? Courage is the willingness to stand for what is right in the face of all that seems to be wrong. It's to stand for the right thing even when the wrong stuff is going on. One of the most disappointing things for me as an individual is when I see things in life where you think that you really realize where a person stands, only to find out that by the time that you went to stand with them, they changed positions. You see, you have to always be willing to stand for what is right, even in the face of everything that's wrong. You got to be able to do that. Number 2, and that's this. Oh, well, here, let me give you Samuel Johnson. That's great. Don't worry about it. Courage is the greatest of all virtues, Samuel Johnson said. He said, because if you haven't got it, if you haven't got courage, then you'll never be able to. Let me have the next one. Next. You may. Let me read that to you from my notes. Samuel Johnson said, courage is the greatest of all virtues. He said, because if you haven't got courage, you may not have an opportunity to use any of the others. Isn't that interesting? He said, if you haven't got courage, you'll never be able to use any of the rest of the virtues of life. Number 2 is that in order for me to live the dream, I have to have a submitted heart. Now, a submitted heart is an interesting thing, because a submitted heart doesn't necessarily mean weakness. You see, just because you're weak just because you're meek doesn't mean you're weak. God may seem like he's meek, but just remember, he's not weak. And so here is something that I wrote for you about submission. Submission is the willingness to bow your knee before men in order to satisfy the requirements of heaven. Do you know, submission doesn't have really kind of other people involved in it. Submission is really a posture of an individual. It's the posture of a person's heart. It's the posture of my heart. I always want to be submissive in the way that I approach life and approach things. How am I submissive in my home? What it is that I'm always bowing and willing to serve the people who are near me. I'm always willing to bow. When I'm submissive at my job, what it is that I'm interested in finding out what is required. And then once I discover what is required, then I don't have to submit to a person. I can actually be submissive to what is required. I've told you many times before, and it remains to be true, that honestly, if what you will learn how to do is you will learn how to be submissive toward God, you'll never need to wonder about your relationship with men. Once you understand your relationship with God, men begin to blur in your focus. I'll never forget the time, and I've mentioned it to you before, but it stands to be reiterated. And that was the time when Linda and I were going to a church, and it's about 45 miles away from here where we went. And we were there kind of every time the doors were open. Linda and I would be there. And when it was, 25, 30 degrees below zero, we had a diesel car that you really had to kind of watch about what was going on. And people were all stranded on the side of the road. And Linda and I we went off to church 45 miles away. We got in there and there were 7 people in church. I remember I used to get off work at 8:45 on a Wednesday night. We'd get into church. It would take 45 minutes to drive there. At 9:30, we would get in while the pastor was saying amen. And I went in there and I said, Pastor, I just want you to know that I'm here. Because you see, I'm submissive toward God. Not toward people. Not convenient toward me. I'm submissive toward God. You see, I can be happy in the midst of tragedy. I can be overjoyed in the midst of difficulty. Why? Because it has really nothing to do with people. It has everything to do with God. And so I remember the time that there was a man, or actually a dentist. He was a dentist. So this actually multiplies the fear of dentists. But I remember this dentist actually came to one of the meetings that I actually had to teach. I was just on a teaching rotation inside of this church, and this dentist came, and what happened was he went back to the pastor and he told the pastor what he perceived that I said. So the pastor's secretary came to me on a Sunday morning and said, the pastor wants to see you in his office before church tonight. And I asked her, I said, does that mean that he wants to give me a promotion? She said, no. I said, well, there must be some kind of mistake. But I'll be there. So I went there and I went in and I sat down. He wasn't in there yet and came in through the back door. And when he came in through the back door, steam was coming out of his ears. He was so mad. He opens his mouth and says, I have a mind to bench you. You'll never preach again. I'm going to blackball you in this city. You'll never be able to ever be a preacher inside this city. And I said, Pastor, please. I said, please. Please. I said, you never need to say that to me. All you need to do is say this, that you never want me to stand up in front of people and ever preach the gospel again. And I said, I'll never do it. So then inside of people's minds, they begin to say things like, well, yeah, but what if God told you that that's what you're supposed to do? I would say then God would actually have to go and talk to him about it. He'd have to stand at the edge of my bed. I would rebuke him as the devil if he was actually standing at the side of my bed and said, I'm telling you that you need to go and preach. I said, no, you go talk to him. You're the one who put him in charge. I'm not in charge. He's in charge. Said, you talk to him and you have him release me to be able to do it, and then I'll go out and I'll preach the gospel again. Yeah, but really, are you? Yeah, absolutely. I have no trouble with it, because remember this, he could never tell me not to witness, because I was told to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. But he could tell me never to stand up and be a preacher in front of people again. Why? Because many are called, but few are what? Who chooses them? Men. God calls them. Every person in this room is called, but it's men that choose you. Why is it? Because remember this, in Acts chapter 13, the first 3 verses, you'll discover, once you look at those things, you'll figure this out, that many prophets and teachers came together. And when they came together, they fasted and prayed. And as they fasted and prayed, the Holy Ghost spoke and said, separate unto me Paul and Barnabas for the work whereunto I have called them. So, as they laid their hands upon us and prayed, so being sent forth by the Holy Ghost. Why? Because Barnabas and Paul had already been preaching since Acts chapter 9. But they were never separated until Acts chapter 13. Because in between the call and the separation is preparation. You must always be prepared. People, how many of you were ready to be married when you got married? No, you were ready to get married. You weren't ready to be married. Being married is a whole bunch different than getting married. Wanting a job is a whole bunch different than having a job. Linda thinks I still need to get ready to get married. That's why I say that, she's been married a long time. I've been married 3 weeks. I've just been married a little while. Because, I bounce in and out. I think, today I think I'm married today. Tonight I don't think. And so what happened was he said, you'll never preach again. And I said, Pastor, you never need to say this to me. I said, because if you tell me never to preach the gospel ever again, I said, I never will. I never will. And he got lockjaw right in front of me. He couldn't speak. He went from this angry thing to a person who couldn't talk. He said to me, he said, you know more than me. I said, Pastor, I don't. One time we were walking down the hall, me and him. I was pastoral care. I was on pastoral care. We're walking down the hallway. And as we're walking down the hallway, he's walking, of course, 2 steps in front of me. I was, there. I look like a real bodyguard, don't I? Arnold Schwarzenegger did not start out like that. Okay, you got to start somewhere. So as we're walking, he turns to me and he looks at me and he says this. He says, I'm not looking for a friend. You understand? I'm not looking for a friend. And I said, oh, Pastor. I said, God didn't call me to be a friend. He called me to be your servant. You see, once you understand being submissive, men can't control you anymore. Because you're living at a plane that they can't deal with. Humans cannot deal with a submissive heart. They can deal with a heart that is fearful, but they can't deal with a submissive heart. A submissive heart lives on a plane that is so high that you can't go anywhere near it. It's almost kind of like whenever like Jesus showed up, or like God ever says anything, guess what? Everybody's quiet. Nobody says anything. Why? There's nothing to say when he says something. Nothing. There's no rebuttal. You can't say, yeah, but. There's nothing to say. So once you understand how to be submissive, you'll never have to submit again. Because it's only to God that you end up being responsible. No human rule, no human regulation can ever dictate to you once you've chosen to be submissive to God. Ever. Ever. Well, I have problems with this person. The reason why you have that problem with a person is because you have a problem with God. And you need to understand how and where you fit. You see, every relationship has rules, of course, both to enter and to remain within it, right? I mean, we all know that. And so every relationship also has a proverbial pecking order. In every relationship, I need to know who I am, right? But it's more important for me to know who I'm not. See, you're very quiet now. Told you. Okay, so number 2, submission is the willingness to bow your knee before men. Not to bow your knee before men. Stop being so afraid of people. What are you afraid of people for? Wasn't Jesus the one who says, listen, don't ever fear the person who can kill your body. Fear the man, fear the one who can actually take both your body and soul and throw them into hell. That's the one you fear. You don't fear people. What is all of that? Number 3. if I'm going to live the dream, I have to understand deep-seated self-control. I have to understand self-control. Why? Because in order to bring God pleasure, I must come to the place in my life where I refuse to flirt with the forbidden. Adam lost. God said, did you eat of the tree that I told you? Don't eat this. Don't do this. What are you doing? Why did you do that? Samson lost because he flirted with the forbidden. When you flirt with it, you'll go to it. If I'm going to make it, what it is I need to understand. If I'm going to live the dream, I need to understand. If I want to bring God pleasure, I need to refuse the temptation to flirt with the forbidden. Number four. I need to have deep-seated, if I'm going to live the dream, I need to have deep-seated integrity. What is that? What is integrity? You see, great leaders always prefer the rejection of men to the disappointment of God. I would always rather be have a problem with you than to live my life in guilt and shame. Because what guilt brings is regret. Regret is always something that lives in the past. And regret, by the way, is the only thing in life that you can ever not get healed from. You can remember. You remember it perfectly. The things that you regret. The things you wish never happened. The things you wish you could do over. It's regret. And although I would want to do them over and over and over, yet I can't. Because regret is the only thing that you can never be healed from. I want to talk about that self-control for a minute. And I want to tell you about it. I want to talk to you about character for a second. Character really is the summation of the ideals by which we live life. And every failure in life, of course, can be traced back to a breakdown somewhere in a person's character. It can. A story is told of a young Jewish boy. And this young Jewish boy actually grew up in this town with his father, and what they were was that they were actually these Jews. But the father actually saw that it was really more profitable for him if he were to go over to the Lutheran religion. Well, what happened was that it really confused the boy. But that confusion actually turned into bitterness. Remember, whatever you do in your life is going to come out in the life of your children. Never forget that. You say, but I don't have any kids yet. That doesn't stop it. So this young Jewish boy, he's not only confused, but that confusion turns to bitterness. It turns to anger. You see, anger always gives way to bitterness because you can't hold on to anger very long. You have to become bitter. Just so mad about something. And so this young boy, what happened was that his anger turned to bitterness. His confusion overwhelmed him. And by the time that he was a young man, he began to have this idea that now has actually influenced, throughout time, it has influenced over 8 billion people. And that young man's name was Karl Marx, the father of communism. Because you see, anger turns to bitterness, confusion. You see, the pressure upon his dad to actually be acceptable in society, that came out in the life of his son. Number 5? How's 5? How's 5? Number 5. Number 5, if I'm going to live the dream, I have to have unswerving diligence. Because if you're looking to get ahead, there is no substitute for diligence. Boy, that's true. You see, diligence, friends, is the mother of all promotion. Diligence. Diligence actually opens the door for promotion in an individual's life. Diligence means to do what's necessary without ever having to be told. A person who's diligent isn't a person that's lazy who has to be jumped on all the time in order to be able to get something done. Diligence. So diligence means to do what is necessary without having to be told. A person who's diligent is self-motivated. Diligence, actually, in the dictionary, it's just persistent and hard-working effort in doing something. To be a diligent person is a person who's focused, is a person who's driven. It's an individual who knows how to do that. Number 6. Number 6 is uncompromising relationships. If I'm going to live the dream, I got to have right people. I know Dave's talked to you about that before. Charlton's talked to you about that before. I've talked to you about that until you don't even hear me when I talk to you about it anymore. That's why I'm glad those guys are here. That way that, you can hear it fresh. These unswerving or these uncompromising relationships. Because success is a team sport. No one ever climbs to the top alone. Because every relationship that you have is either drawing you closer to or driving you further away from God's will for your life. Always remember this, that at any given moment, there are always 3 relationships that you have. The first one is compromisers. These compromisers are individuals that are always trying to get you to compromise your standards. You begin to try to hold on to something because you want to begin to build something in your life, and they're always there to try to open a door so that things will be easier even during the moments when you're trying to stand for what's right. The second one is companions. In your life, there's always companions, and the thing about companions is that there are those people that are neither good nor bad for your future. When you have companions, it's almost impossible to tell what their effect is on your life. Because you need time to be in between where you are today. A person has to begin to have history so that you can tell really who they are in your life. These people are friends. They're family people. And this is where people make mistakes. They begin to make mistakes over the idea that actually this person's my friend. Well, let me ask you this. Are you a Christian or are you a believer first and then a friend, or are you a friend first and then are you a believer? You have to decide what you are first and then what you are first. You see, there are people in life, we live in a society that's got, the right and the left. We've got the good and the bad. We've got all of these things that we have as a society. We've got that. But there are people in life that don't tell you who they are until they believe that they've got you close enough to them for them to reveal themselves to you. So that they can turn around to you and they can say something like, well, I thought you were my friend. See, they're really looking for that in your life. They want to get you into their life close enough to where they believe that you would never, ever turn away from them. But then there are those people who tell you who they are right up front. This is who I am right now, and then they make you decide whether or not that you want to be there or whether or not you don't. These people are companions. But in most cases, you don't know whether a person's good or bad for you. And then the last one is this, is that you have, the third one is the committed. Those people who are undoubtedly committed to your success. Do you know you'll only run past a couple of these people in all of your life? The people that really have your future in their heart. That they really care what happens to you. That things are right with you. That things go in the right direction. You know, it's one thing to have your grandmother care. So that you make sure that she never finds out really what you do. But it's another thing for God to send someone in your life. Well, if you know that God can send someone in your life, why is it so difficult for you to believe that so can the devil? I'll never forget in the movie Tombstone, Doc Holliday had his girlfriend named Kate. Kate, a wonderful girl. And here he is, he's dying of leukemia, coughing up his lungs. And he just keeps smoking. Tuberculosis, whatever, same thing. To me, I don't know the difference between the two, so whatever it is. He had an ingrown toenail and he was dying from it. I don't know. But here it was, TB. He had TB and he was, coughing up his lungs. And so Kate lights up a cigarette for him. When the doctor told him, said, listen, you need to stop all this stuff in your life. You need to stop smoking. You need to stop this woman. So he tells the doctor, get out of here. And then Kate lights up a smoke for him and hands him the cigarette. She puts it in his mouth, and he takes a drag, and she says to him, she said, Doc, she said, haven't I been a good woman to you? He said, yeah, you've been a good woman. He said, but then again, he said, you could be the Antichrist. I mean, at least Doc Holliday knew. A lot of times people don't figure it out. That, some people in your life, man, are good. And some people could be the Antichrist. You see, there's only a few people in your life that God will send to you that will be committed to your future. And then lastly, number 7. Number 7 is that if I'm going to have eternity in my heart, if what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, I'm going to be able to live the dream. I have to learn how to live it by sowing. To be a giver. Because everything in your future is created by something in your present. Whatever you need in your future, you have right now. You don't need anything else. You have what it takes in order for you to get to tomorrow. You've got what it takes. It's inside you right now for the next 25 years. It's here. You see, your seed of today always creates your harvest tomorrow. In Isaiah 32:17, the Bible tells you that when you see the floods come and the waters carry down the seed along its bank, then in the future there'll be a harvest that comes off those seeds all the way down that river. So what do I need to live the dream? Fix your inside. God will take care of your outsides. You fix what's inside you. You fix what's in your heart. The most beautiful people I've ever met in my life are people that when I come in their presence, boy, I tell you, I feel better about it. There are people that you can meet inside your life that when you get with them, they make you feel better about who you are. Doesn't matter what a person has. It just matters who a person is. Let's bow our heads and pray. Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you so much. Say this after me, Father. I desire to be what you've called me to be. Inside me. Transform me. Change me. Make me who you want me to be. From this moment forward, I'll serve you. I'll love others. I'll think of good things. And I'll be an encourager all the days of my life. In Jesus' name.